The time has come, my friends, to lock in because there are a collection of weather threats that are set to potentially impact the weather where you are. We're going to look at all of those today, plus we're going to look at the big picture because I am growing increasingly concerned that we are headed into a pattern that is quite conducive to tropical cyclone formation and even U.S. landfalls. We're going to get into that today. I'll have your weather IQ question, and as I routinely say, you may not like the forecast, but you will leave smarter than when you came and learn something along the way. That is my promise to you, and we'll have a little bit of fun as we go. So we're going to get into all of that right now, and we're going to start by taking a look at our tropical weather update. All right, we're going to start here by taking a look at the Atlantic, where the National Hurricane Center has highlighted 3 areas of interest, things we need to keep our eyes on. One of those is Dexter. Dexter formed off the southeast coast. There it is, minimal tropical storm, 35 miles per hour, headed off to the northeast, not going to bother anybody but the fishes. We've got another area of interest off the southeast coast where a 40% chance of development exists over the next 7 days. And if it does exist, where will it go and how strong will it get? We're going to answer that here in just a minute. And then we have this big orange cone out here in the middle of the Atlantic. Now, there are a couple of waves that are moving off. The models are keying in on those and are actually developing some of those as we go on out in time. And there are a couple of different scenarios that we're going to look at too in terms of what could unfold if such a system develops. I think a system will develop or two, and then we will see what happens next. Folks, there are a couple of things I want to kind of key in on here. I want to show you. First thing we're going to do is we're going to start here in the main development region. Look at this. This is Africa, way over here. And there are waves that are just coming off of the coast of Africa. There's one in Central Africa, there's one coming off here. And as these waves emerge, they are moistening up our main development region. Here it is as we travel east across the Pacific. Another wave out here in the Central Atlantic, another one out ahead of that. We get on up here to the Antilles, there they are. And north of that, you find the Bahamas, and there's another tropical wave in the Bahamas. And the models are not really keying in on any of this, so we're not really seeing much going on. But here is Dexter up here in the northwest corner of your screen. Left-hand corner of your screen. That's what I meant to say. And there is our activity off the southeast coast. What happens here, folks, you get these frontal boundaries that sit off the southeast coast in the summertime. The winds are jet streams displaced to the north. Not enough oomph to get these things too far out to sea, so you get them hanging up here off the southeast coast. They act as a focus for showers and thunderstorms, convection over the Gulf streams, providing plenty of energy. And so you get these clusters of showers, thunderstorms. They release latent heat. That's more energy. Eventually you get some spin. That creates more thunderstorms. That creates more latent heat. You get this feedback mechanism. Now you got a tropical cyclone, and if conditions are favorable, you know, it can develop pretty rapidly in certain circumstances. Well, this is not that circumstance. We're not looking at a big tropical storm or hurricane developing out here. We could see a tropical depression, maybe a low-end tropical storm at some point over the next 7 days, and we're going to keep our eyes on it to see. We could certainly speculate about what might happen, this or that, but none of the guidance is really showing anything of note except for a couple of weak waves. And what's going to happen is if a weak wave does develop, it's going to track slowly, and kind of meander around and eventually get kicked on out to sea. That is the expectation. We've got a trough that sits back here over the Mississippi Valley that's funneling in all of this rain. The trough is kind of back like this, and it is just funneling in all this moisture. You can see these clouds and showers and thunderstorms all over the southeast, and that's providing a flooding threat. Some of this moisture may get pulled in. That would be the biggest threat, and we don't have to see a big tropical cyclone with big winds like we saw with Chantal. We didn't see big winds. We saw a lot of flooding, and that could be a problem. So that's what we're going to watch over the next several days. But really out in the main development region, this is where we're looking at something of note forming and potentially impacting us down the line. The GIF that I ran earlier was the GFS. This is that run, and you can see it big picture here. We've got Dexter out here harming nobody but fishes. We don't really see a lot of development through the cycle with this area of moisture off the southeast coast. We just see it sort of get pulled in land a little bit and absorbed into that trough. But we do see development out here in the MDR. Occasionally we get a little bit of a low that pops up with some of these waves. There it moves across into here north of the Antilles, and look what happens when it does. GFS starts to develop this and really goes to town. It gets really strong and comes in near Wilmington and moves up through the outer banks of North Carolina, across the Sounds, and then up into the Northeast, and so on and so on and so on. We've got plenty of more moisture to go coming off of Africa, and it puts another cyclone in the Gulf by the end of the run. That's 2 weeks out, folks. We're looking at something here on an operational run that's all over the place when you start to get beyond 7 days. So we can't take that seriously, but what we need to understand is the pattern, and does the pattern support such a tropical cyclone developing? And if it does it support it hitting land? And the answer is it does support tropical cyclone development. As we get more into August, the pattern becomes much more supportive. Here's the European as well. And landfalling, I'm becoming much more concerned about landfalling storms as we get into August too, and I'll show you why that is here in a little bit. There's Dexter as we go on out of time. We get on out into Friday. We start to see a little bit of a signal for a low pressure developing here. Either way, it's going to be cloudy and rainy along the coast and into the southeast as well. There's a system. It develops in the main development region. It takes that system on off to the north. It will eventually develop it into a weak tropical storm, and that could happen, but it looks like either way there's a weakness in ridging out here, and it's going to shoot that on off to the north. There's that little system, little weak low. It develops, tries to develop along the coast, and eventually it shoots it on out too. But look what's happening down here in the MDR. Waves coming off. This area is moistening up, and look at that. We get a wave train going, and we see a wave turn into a tropical storm, into a hurricane as it gets into the Caribbean Sea, tries to shoot the gap and get into the Gulf at the end of the run. That's 2 weeks out. So my point to you is that we have a pattern that's developing that is becoming more conducive to these tropical cyclones in terms of their formation, and over time we've got ridging to the north that will help to keep these on an easterly track, or sorry, a westerly track, and get them toward the United States. So that's what I'm a little bit concerned about. We've been watching dry air as we get on out into August. Dust becomes less of a factor. We're seeing better shear environment, plenty of warm waters because we haven't had any tropical cyclones to overturn those waters. We're seeing rising motion replace sinking air, and all of these are more conducive to tropical development. This is drier air. This is the main development region down here. Plenty of dry air along this, and as we get on out in time, we start to lose that. Look at this, toward the end of the period, we start to get a lot less dry air and a lot more pockets of moisture in here. So we're going to really need to start watching as we get beyond mid-August for potential tropical cyclones taking that southern route and getting on into the Gulf. So early on in the period, I'm not so much concerned about landfalling, but as we get on through August, we're looking at potential for more tropical cyclone development, potential landfalling as well. This is our MJO. We've been talking about this pulse of convection over in the Indian Ocean that can influence the tropical Atlantic, and it does so by helping to create rising motion. And certainly when we have rising motion, convection wants to fire up into that environment. Sinking motion kind of squelches everything, and that's what's going on when you get the MJO slowly moving into phase 2, even though it's inside the circle of death, we call it here. But this is phase 2 and phase 3. These are kind of conducive for that better conditions in the Atlantic, lower shear, rising motion out there. And so we've got some big picture signals that are converging to create a background for tropical cyclone formation, potentially landfalls too. So that's what's going on there. Now we're going to take a look at your weather IQ question and see if you know the answer. All right, we're continuing along with our tropical weather questions series, and today's question is, which ocean typically sees the most tropical cyclones each year? The Pacific, the Atlantic, the Indian, or the Southern? If you know it, type it in the comments section. If you don't, simply wait till the end of the show and I will reveal it to you, and then you will know the answer. In the meantime, we've got to get into some additional areas of weather that are potentially threatening parts of the country, and we're going to look at those right now in our weekly planner. Folks, if you haven't yet subscribed, please hit the subscribe button down below and give us a like if you like the content. We've had a lot of growth over the past couple of weeks and really want to thank you for all of that. I appreciate that. If there's anything that I can pray over for you, please put it in the comment section. Certainly continue to keep us in your prayers as well. We all need that, and really appreciate all the good comments that we've had over the past few days. So thanks for joining the team, and sign on if you haven't done so. Hit that subscribe button. We're going to start here by taking a look at the satellite image. You can see a couple of areas of interest. Big cluster of convection moving through the Dakotas. Dickinson, Williston in North Dakota seeing some showers this morning. A little low pressure is setting up here. Will provide the focus for showers and thunderstorms and severe weather later today with a tornado threat. Boundary extending back into Southern California. New trough working into the Pacific Northwest, going to keep you guys cool and unsettled there. there. Thunderstorms firing in the Gulf around Mobile and Gulfport, extending up into Georgia. We've got a lot of rain here around Athens and Atlanta, moving into Augusta, just west of Columbia, up to Rock Hill and Charlotte, North Carolina, Greensboro, Lynchburg, Charlottesville, Virginia, all seeing rain this morning. If you're traveling around this morning, you're going to need those umbrellas. Clouds extending all the way up into the northeast, and this milky stuff that you're seeing, that's wildfire smoke, folks, coming out of Canada. It's still here, it still exists across the Midwest, Great Lakes, and into the Northeast. And there you see it on the hazards map or the alerts map. Look at this. Air quality alerts for Wisconsin and Michigan, parts of Minnesota, Illinois, Pennsylvania, and New York, New Hampshire, and Vermont up here, folks. We're seeing lots of bad air still in place, though it's a little less intense at the surface than it has been. Flood watches up here in the southeast. We'll continue to see rounds of rain in Georgia, parts of Alabama. Windy conditions, dry and hot here in the Four Corners region, winds gusting to 30s, potentially 40. So don't burn anything out here, and very, very hot in the desert southwest all week with temperatures working into the 100 and teens. Air quality map, a lot of oranges today, not so much in the red or purple, so that's better, but still bad air up here in the interior northeast of the Great Lakes. Dallas, Houston, western Colorado, where wildfire smoke is a problem there too. Las Vegas, Los Angeles, all seeing bad air. There's the smoke map. You can see the smoke trajectories are more favorable now coming out of the wildfire regions up to the northeast, but there's a high pressure sitting here in southeast Canada to just the clockwise flow around that's just anchoring that smoke in place. It will dissipate as we go out in time, and you can see that on the image, and it will eventually move off. So give it a couple days and you'll get better and better air up there. There's our frontal zone parked across the Gulf out into the Atlantic. That's a focus for showers and thunderstorms. There's the trough along the Mississippi Valley into the Ohio Valley again. Moisture coming out of the Gulf of cold rain, plenty of moisture, plenty of showers and thunderstorms, and a flood potential here in parts of the southeast. There's that little low pressure getting its act together and will provide a focus for severe weather, including tornadoes later in the northern plains. Over the next 7 days, we could see as much as 2 to 3 inches up here in the central plains into the Corn Belt, and then back into the southeast, maybe getting close to 4 to even 6 inches of rain in spots, particularly along the coastal areas. Florida, you need the rain. We don't need it in such a hurry, but you definitely have been in drought and dry conditions, and so more rain is better for you all. Just not, we've seen what happens when it comes down in a hurry, so just pay attention to any flash flood alerts that happen, folks. Here's the radar over the next few hours and a couple of days. We're looking at rain this morning into the Carolinas, back into Georgia and South Carolina. As we get into the afternoon, that will persist. I haven't seen the sun in like 7 days, 4 days probably more like it, and I don't expect to see it for the next several. It's going to be rainy, drizzly, and cloudy for much of the eastern U.S. over the next few days. You can see that rain just move off as we get into the evening hours tonight. Georgia piling that rain back up. South Carolina, another slug moves in into the overnight, into the a.m. tomorrow, so it's going to be a rainy commute again as we go into the morning hours for South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, and then we see another system working into interior sections of the Northeast, bringing some showers and thunderstorms throughout the day tomorrow afternoon, Wednesday, and then the rain and drizzle just continues through the evening tomorrow night. So that's what's going on there. Looking at high temperatures as we go through the week, this is already out too far, but here we go. 70s and 80s across the northern tier, all the way into the southeast where we find wedging. Look at these 60s up in the higher peaks down here, 70s up in the northeast, 90s in Florida, 90s surging into the central plains, and hot in the desert southwest. My goodness, 113 degrees in Phoenix, going to be very hot. Troughing, keeping it nice and cool, relatively speaking, up here in the Pacific Northwest this afternoon. Same regime tomorrow, just warming up in the plains a little bit more. We're seeing hundreds poke into the south central plains, 90s up to the Canadian border, wedging hanging on in the east, troughing hanging on in the northwest, keeping it cool up there. Exact same pattern again. Not much is happening with this pattern. It's sort of just stagnant for a while, but it is warming up in the central plains, and we're seeing moisture return as well. So we're going to see humidity values come back up, hundreds in the plains, hot in the desert southwest. There's that trough with cooler and unsettled weather conditions in the northwest and cool in the east. That regime maintains itself through Friday as well as we get get into the last day of the week. Wedging continues. Can you believe this? A 5-day, 6-7 day wedge event in the middle of the summertime. And there we have cool weather up in the northern Rockies and hot in the midsection of the country. Now, we're going to take a look at that long range pattern because it has implications for hurricane season and for our sensible weather across the states. And we're going to look and see exactly what it's going to bring next. If you think it's been hot, folks, it has been hot. You're right about that. For the most part, for most of the country, it's been hot. And it's also been very, very humid. I have people tell me all the time, well, it was hot in the 1930s, or it was hot, hotter in 18 whatever. Maybe so, but we've got a lot more moisture in the air now, so it feels a lot worse, and it's more dangerous because it's harder to cool off. Your body needs to sweat. It's harder to sweat when there's so much moisture around. We've been very tropical this summer, but with the exception of the West Coast and really down here in the southern plains stretching up into the northern Midwest, we have been above normal for much of the country so far. That's the last 60 days. But look at August here. Woo! It's been cool over the month of August. We're seeing departures near -10 in these green areas, folks. That is pretty chilly. In order to start August, we need some pretty cool weather coming in out of Canada, and we've certainly had that, and we've seen a nice start temperature-wise, except for the southern tier and Florida. You have missed out on that action. Here's the rainfall over the past 60 days or so, and look at this. Haves and have-nots have prevailed. That type of pattern has prevailed over much of the South, so lots of above normal precipitation right next to much below normal precipitation over the last 60 days. Florida stands out, the Northeast stands out, and of course, way out here in the West. Look at this. You guys are in drought conditions. That is unlikely to change anytime soon, I am afraid, but this is the precipitation map up here in the northern tier and in the Corn Belt. Really have had your share of rain up there. There's the drought situation. It's getting worse and worse out west. Pockets of drought showing up in various parts of the country, out here in the Central Plains, up here in the Great Lakes, down in the Southeast and Florida in particular. Alaska, a little bit dry in parts, but not too bad. Hawaii experiencing some drought as well. Now here is what the European ensemble is showing. I usually show the EPS because it's the most reliable ensemble suite. The GFS, though, happens to generally agree with this, so I'm pretty confident in this pattern. But as we go out through time, we've got that trough that's just plaguing us here in the southeast. If this trough remains in place, I'm not worried about so much hurricane activity making it into the States, but unfortunately it's not going to. We got a big ridge developing in Canada, big flat ridge developing out here in the Four Corners, keeping it dry and keeping it hot here. That trough plagues us through the course of this week. 36 hours out Wednesday, we get into Friday, still troughing in the southeast, meaning unsettled conditions here. There's another trough working in the Pacific Northwest, ridging, holding on here as we get on into the weekend. Seeing general troughing here in the west, so we may find some precipitation here in the plains and the Midwest as we get on into the week, and a big ridge along the East Coast. When we start to see ridging out here in the Atlantic and the East Coast, this opens the door for southern sliding storms to move in from this direction from the Atlantic. Ridging is not what you want to see out there. Eventually we'll get some breaks in that ridge, but again, center of the U.S. trough, and everything sort of gets flattened out as the jet stream pulls way up to the north. When the jet stream pulls way up to the north, it leaves ridging over the entire Atlantic basin and into the southern tier of the United States. That means hot weather, drying out, and also the door is open for tropical systems to slide in underneath this ridge. That's the pattern that I'm being concerned about as we go on out through time. And eventually we retrograde it back to a trough here. If we get, or a ridge out in the southwest, if we see that, then we have an opportunity for any cyclones that sit out here in this area to work in between these two ridges. Okay, so we're going to have to watch for that as we go on out in time. The precipitable water, when is our tropical air mass coming back? Well, right now we've got high pressure up here across the northern tier with dry air with those browns. But look what happens as we go on out through Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday of next week. Get back into this tropical air mass again, above normal precipitable waters, and that just hangs on through the end of the run. This is 2 weeks out. Much of the nation gets hot and humid. Again, these are the precipitation anomalies in 7-day increments. So 1 through 7, this takes us out till next Tuesday. Highest chance of above normal precipitation is along the southeast coast, northeast to the desert southwest, drier than normal, and again wetter than normal up here, and a normal signal because you don't get a lot of rain out here in these areas typically, but we need rain because we are so dry out there in Utah and Idaho, Nevada, and California. So going out in time, you see where the precipitation signal goes. It sort of diminishes, and then it sets up here across the northern Midwest, really northern plains into the Midwest and Great Lakes regions, and everywhere along the southern tier looks to dry out as we move on out in time. Temperature anomalies in 5-day increments. Cool in the northwest, cool in the southeast under cloud cover and rain, warm in the nation's midsection up to the Great Lakes. That just gets warmer, and everybody gets warmer and warmer and warmer and warmer and warmer as we get on out in time. And this is the pattern with the jet stream way to the north. We're going to see plenty of warmth out here in all of the lower 48, with the exception being down here in the south where it is going to be warmer than normal, but the signal is maybe a little less strong, and up here in the northern plains and the Pacific Northwest too. So that is your long range forecast, folks. We're going to wrap things up here by taking a look at the space weather and geological outlook, and we've got a sunspot that we're looking at. Last but not least, our space weather and geological update. We're going to start here by taking a look at the KP index, and it is below geomagnetic conditions, so nothing going on there. A couple of minor M-class solar flares, as you can see down here in the X-ray chart. The sun itself, there it is, spinning in this direction. There you go. And we've got a trans-equatorial coronal hole. You can see that showing up right here with a bigger pronounced region toward the lower limb. But in any event, this will enhance solar wind, could put us in minor geomagnetic storm conditions. There's your sunspot disk, and we're looking at this one here, 4168. This is the big one, and it's growing in size and complexity. You can see negative and positive charges interspersed, and when you get that, you have the potential for fairly decent sized solar flares. If we get one of those, we could see a coronal mass ejection, which could put us in more than just minor geomagnetic storm conditions. So we're watching all of that. We had a 5.1 way out here in the Aleutians. You can't really see it. It's showing up. There it is. It is showing up, 5.1. And we've had a couple of other minor shakes. There's one in Hawaii, down here in Central America as well, but nothing really, really, really big since that 8.8 over here. This was in the Russian province the other day. That's what's going on. No new volcanic activity in our Pacific Ring of Fire. And there's the moon, 85.4% now, waxing gibbous, going up to a full moon. Our sturgeon moon comes on August the 9th. And if it's not too bright, and it might be, you'll get out in the 12th and 13th and you can see the Perseids and see some fireballs in the sky. They peak at that particular point in time. 48 days until September the 22nd, calendar fall. Of course, meteorological fall starts September the 1st. Either way, we're looking forward to that. At least I am. I cannot wait for this summer to end. We get into cooler weather. Now, that takes us to the answer to today's Weather IQ question. Did you get it right? Well, here it is. Which ocean typically sees the most tropical cyclones per year? The Pacific, Atlantic, Indian, and the Southern. And the answer is the Pacific Ocean, as you may have gathered. And in the Western Pacific, they call these typhoons. Now you know about tropical cyclones in the Pacific, and you also need to know that in 1914, on this day, the first electric traffic light was installed in Cleveland, Ohio. It became the first site of the first electric traffic signal system, marking a key innovation in urban transportation. Congratulations, Cleveland, Ohio. Now, when we run red lights, we have you to thank for that, okay? Let's don't run red lights. Let's drive safely. Don't drive angry. Remember that. Groundhog Day taught us that. In any event, feels like Groundhog Day. We do this every day, and we'll be back tomorrow with another episode. So hope you have a wonderful it's Tuesday. It's not Monday anymore. That's good. We're working through the work week. Hope you have a wonderful Tuesday afternoon, and we will see you back again. As always, this is Cold Rain reminding you, other stations run 24/7, but we've got you covered right here, right now at Cold Rain's Weather World, 4814. Take care, folks. Have a great day.